My journey is unimportant to those foreign to the feeling of desperate longing. To know that familiar stinging sensation is to know the dreaded gripping nature of nostalgia. It winds you up, binds you into the memories of your prior life. It holds you there, demanding your thirst be quenched. It builds over time the endless desert of remembrance, until all that's left is but grains of time that once encapsulated hours of joyful splendor. My soul is dry, and I needed to return. I needed to bring water, to nurture the seeds and watch the magnificent spring wade through. He haunted me in my dreams. He was naked and afraid, calling out to me, wishing for me to warm him. He, the corporeal self, and me, the ember soul then snuffed out. Together, we wish to be rekindled, body and soul. Once more I must insist, this journey is unremarkable. It is the one I walked. Oh, come on! So here's a couple of things, alright? This is an impressions video. Coming back 5 years later, this is an impressions video. This is not an in-depth analysis. I'm just a normal guy, just living my life during the pandemic like most of y'all are, okay? This is not an in-depth review. However, I will be listing and linking videos to people who really talk about the new ecosystem that is Final Fantasy XIV. So if you want a more enriching and in-depth analysis about the current state of the game, follow those people in the description. They will talk your ears off about the ins and outs. I'm subscribed to them. They're amazing. And very, very insightful. So if that's kind of what you're looking for, you're not going to find it here. You're just going to find ramblings of a madman. In 2015, I was at an impasse, and I had to reflect on why I wasn't enjoying Final Fantasy XIV like I had their other MMOs. Before Final Fantasy XIV: A Realm Reborn, I played Final Fantasy XI for about 6 to 7 years. After that, I played Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 for a very, very brief moment. I want to say about 2 to 3 weeks. I bought the collector's edition. I made my character. I started leveling that character. I was engrossed by their openings. Like, for everything Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 got wrong, motion capture and their unique way of telling a story was not one of them. Then I did Final Fantasy: A Realm Reborn beta. It was a breath of fresh air in many ways. I still remember people camping at the dungeon entrances, despite Duty Finder being the main way of queuing, even then. And it just brought back memories of Final Fantasy XI, people with their flag up. Nostalgia, it hit hard. It hit hard. And it was because of Duty Finder that I decided to leave. Duty Finder in 2015 gave me this lesson, which is rotations can be practiced, mechanics can be learned. But people in Duty Finder, holy shit, man. It wasn't that they were bad players. They were the best players for Final Fantasy XIV. It was designed to cater to them. Now, I do want to say, I have met incredible people in my time playing Final Fantasy XIV. I have made friends on the Phoenix server. I was part of a free company with those friends. We did primal fights, we did dungeon runs, we had great members, we had casual to people who were doing raids. It was an incredibly fun time to be among such incredible human beings, and those are experiences that I treasure. I treasure so much that I don't delete their messages from my Moogle box. There's a lot of happy memories, but primarily I left because on whole, my experiences with people, especially in the contained environment that was Duty Finder, was wholly negative. Gradually, I became disillusioned with how people treated me in Duty Finder. Eventually, I had to leave. The majority of my beratement came in the form of, please pull more, please pull less, did you watch guides, do you know where to go, please skip cutscenes, even if you were new, and the inevitable, please uninstall game. I got this often. This was my consistent experience with Duty Finder. I must have been the world's shittiest player. Was I a shitty player? Don't answer that. Eventually, I had to sort of wrestle with the idea of, should I experience the game secondhand through guides? And is that how Yoshi P intended the game to be experienced? Then I thought to myself, yes, actually, whether it was intended or not, no one's got time for anything anymore, much less you. Or me, the world's shittiest player. Part of the experiences that I considered uniquely Final Fantasy was zones, these monster zones where you linked up with people, you made camp, and then you grinded out for levels. Or you would forge these parties, as difficult as they were, they made people kind of the currency, not so much the automatic burden you had when going into a dungeon now, especially if they're first-timers. There was a sense of separation between level grinding and main story quests, the MSQ. If you wanted to level grind, you went to a camp, you went far away, you did it with people who had the same mentality, and then you just worked at it, and you just did that. If you wanted to do the main story, you did that separately as well. You were always of the mentality, I'm in the main story because I want to be there. If you're unfamiliar with Final Fantasy XIV at all, and this is true of it when the game launched till now, it is a narrative-based MMO. Much of anything of value, be it items, job abilities, or content, is hidden behind MSQ. Initially, upon hearing that, it may sound unique and provocative, and that they must really stand behind their story. Despite the different ways a person approaches an MMO, since they force you to finish it in order to progress. This may be an inadvertent consequence, but you end up in these timed dungeons with people who may have done this a million times and they just want it over as soon as the duty commences. They're being forced to revisit these old MSQ dungeons for boosted XP or poetics. Poetics is another form of currency that you use to buy higher level gear. You have these unwilling veterans who return to these old stomping grounds to, quote-unquote, help. You then have this clash between speedrunners and newbies, and from my lonesome experience, they almost always ended poorly. You have people learning the ins and outs of a dungeon for the first time, and it may not be at the pace you'd like. Everyone's rate of learning is different. The problem is, no one has time for you to figure it out, okay? The timer says a minute has passed, and for a lot of people, that tells them they should have been done with this dungeon hours ago. You then get this weird power dynamic in the relationship between veteran and new player. The veteran has to move at a slower pace, or unwillingly take on the mantle of tutor. And truth be told, they didn't sign up for that, nor might they be good at it. Imagine yourself new to FF14, or MMOs in general, and you were the unlucky one who was time and time again thrown in with unwilling participants from either spectrum. It was because of that, and this rush mentality, I eventually left. And again, this is a unique experience. I know when you talk to most people, when they talk about Duty Finder, when they talk about the Final Fantasy XIV community, it's generally good. So I want to say that my experiences are utterly anecdotal. The fact that I'm making this video is simply for those who probably can relate, and who have probably left because of that reason, and who are probably thinking to come back. I'll just say now, it's much different. So I guess the next question is, why did I come back? If those were all my complaints, if those were my smooth-brained boomer ideas, why did I even bother coming back? My friend convinced me to come back. Yeah, it was simple as that. He just asked me to come back and I came back. No, it took a pandemic. I mean, I can't go outside. I might as well take a walk through Limsa. And there it is. End of story. Happy New Year. Looking forward to 2021. I consider myself very much an outsider looking in. The game that I remember from 2015, A Realm Reborn, has drastically changed. There was so much of this game that had changed that revisiting it and unlearning the things that I used to know, it took time. It still takes time, to this day. So job rotations have changed. Everyone's a DPS. These are just broad strokes ideas. Speed running, Unchained. The moment your Greaves hit the floor, you're expected to have been done with that dungeon. the game doesn't really start until you get to level 50, until you've unlocked most of the things hidden behind the main story quest, hidden behind MSQ, which, for the life of me, I cannot comprehend why that's still a thing in this game. So if you're returning, just know that you doing daily roulettes, you doing regular stuff, you exploring the map, getting all that XP, just naturally you will over-level the main story. Maybe, maybe not. That was my experience. Again, anecdotal. Doesn't speak for everybody. Praetorium, Castrum Meridium. Those two endgame dungeons for A Realm Reborn. Those cutscenes are unskippable now. Were you one of those people like me who were just forced to skip it and you never got to watch them in real time? Well, now you will do so each time. You must watch it. For everyone who is new coming in at this point on, you will watch it. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? I think it's a wholly bad idea. I think it's a terrible idea. But it's hard for me to not wrestle with the idea that I wish it was there sooner. You are encouraged to go back for a large sum of poetics. And I should also say this too. Poetics are given to you in the hundreds, 200s. First time people, whoever's first timer there, get a bonus of 100 poetics. You get 200 poetics running Castrum Meridium or Praetorium baseline. When I first started, I thought I would never get Ironworks gear in a day. In a day, coming back from 5 years hiatus, I got all the poetics I need to get the Ironworks gear. Finally, item level 130. The dream of 5 years ago before Heaven's Ward. Just to put that in perspective, I've seen item level 500 gear. Ironworks gear is nothing, but just to put on that armor, I was like, oh my god, I'm living my fantasy, my final fantasy. I queue up for it just for the poetics, and we get into that dungeon, and no one is new. You shouldn't run it when there's no one new there. I mean, what's the point? But the thing is, they offer so much poetics. It's hard to turn down. So you just deal with the unskippable cutscenes. And again, I wrestle with that. I'm like, oh my god. I get to experience it firsthand. But now I'm forced to experience it firsthand all the time. I have decided the moment I stop having fun, I'm gonna leave. And you should do the same. And here it is. You think that's so obvious. You think that, well, of course. Well, then you're not in the same perspective as I and the two other people who are still listening. Sometimes you're so loyal to a brand. Sometimes you're so addicted to a gameplay mechanic. You return to that game often. Sometimes you have friends on that platform. And even if you don't enjoy the game, you return to that platform just for those people. Not for yourself, but for those people. So this video in many ways is what nobody's ever asked for. On a personal note, and this might be unique to me and my friend, queuing up for a dungeon was nerve-wracking. I mean, it still is for me. Admittedly, dungeon running is my least favorite part about this game. That dreadful commence sound does not help. But learning anything well comes from experience. I always tell my friend, you can practice your rotation on a dummy for hours, and he did. I did as well. You can practice your rotation on that dummy. But combat is the ultimate teacher. And that's it. That's the end of this rant. If you're returning, I say welcome back. Welcome back. They say the story gets better after Stormblood. They say Shadowbringers is the magnus opus of Final Fantasy Online. I personally think that the moment I get to Shadowbringers, I'll be one of those few people. And I mean few. A lot of people, speak highly about this thing, about that expansion. I'll probably be the few people who say the story probably gets better after Shadowbringers. I'm kidding. I'm being cynical. Don't hate me. And if you're still wondering whether you should come back or should you hold off after the newest patch release, let me be the first one to tell you, it doesn't matter. If that still hasn't swayed you, I don't know what to say. I'm having fun. You might too. But never mind my cynicism. Welcome back. And also apologies for this video and my existence. Thank you for watching this whole thing. I know it's a mess. I know I'm rambling. I know it's difficult to tell sarcasm, but there was hints of sarcasm in that whole thing. Ultimately, I hope you've had fun with this video. Put it in the background. Consider this Final Fantasy poop. Maybe it's not good enough to be poop. But thank you for watching. I've just been born, learning to walk. Oh!
The fire emergency investigation is complete.